Okay, everyone, welcome back to Spirit Island. It's been a little bit, sadly not intentionally. I recorded this meet and greet and then the following game a few days ago, and the microphone wasn't working and I didn't notice, so I've got to do it again. And I've just found time to do at least the meet and greet. So sorry about the delay. I will definitely remember to check the mic from now on. In any case, this time we're going to meet the two spirits we haven't played with yet, which is to say this fine entity here, the bringer of dreams and nightmares, and also one other, ocean something about the ocean. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's start with bringer of dreams and nightmares, since it's kind enough to show up immediately. Now both bringer and the ocean are the two spirits that the game rates as high complexity. In this case, I pretty much agree with both. Both of them are defined in large part by their special rules, which are pretty significant. So we'll start there. Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares has just the one, to dream 1,000 deaths, but that is... it's a doozy. It basically means that everything you do is just a dream and it's all spooky and stuff. So your powers just can't do damage or destroy things, except for your own presence. I don't know of any powers, side note, that destroy your own presence, but maybe there's some in one of the expansions or some I'm forgetting about. Anyway, so your powers are all illusions and dreams and weirdness, so they can't damage or destroy things. But if they would destroy or damage things via, or damage and therefore destroy things, then instead they generate fear, if it's anything except an explorer, and push anything that isn't a city. Now, the fear you generate is more than you would for destroying the thing. +1 on the villages, +2 on the cities. So you generate fear very quickly. In general, Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares is the most likely spirit to cause fear wins and tends to generate a lot of fear cards as well. This is part of that reason, but the whole suite really focuses a fair bit around fear. So the obvious things about this power are it makes it much more difficult to remove things, particularly to clean up really built up areas. You might have noticed in a lot of the prior videos, one play pattern that I end up falling into a lot, and I think comes up fairly regularly, is you'll manage to triage almost all of the lands that are getting ravaged in any given card's life cycle, but occasionally one or two will get through, place a couple of blight, which is okay because you have a little bit of blight to give before getting to Blighted Island, and of course a lot to give once you do. And then eventually what tends to happen is that you get one or two really powerful slow major powers that let you clean up the built-up areas that have slipped through. With Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, that doesn't work the same way because all those heavy damage slow powers don't actually destroy anything, they just push it around. Now, one important thing, of course, is that this doesn't apply to Dahan dealing damage in the Ravage and you defending them. So one way in which Bringer of Nightmares can play a pretty normal game is if you just take a lot of defense powers, you protect Dahan, you move Dahan around, and you occasionally get some extra fear with this, or you use it to push things into places where you're going to have a good Dahan-based Ravage, and then the Dahan kill it, and you get bonus fear on top of that. And that's a strong way to play. The other thing that's worth noting, especially if you're playing that way, is that your powers are not allowed to destroy anything other than your own presence. That includes presence from other spirits, in case that comes up, and it includes Dahan. So there are various cards that do a bunch of damage to things in the land, but also destroy some Dahan, or also damage Dahan, or things like that. your powers can't destroy or damage Dahan, and apparently the Dahan know enough about your shenanigans that they don't even care, right? There's no downside to catching the Dahan in some horrible nightmare. They're just like, oh, it must be Tuesday, I guess. Anyway, I don't know whether being a Dahan would be awesome or awful or both, but it'd certainly be weird. But clearly, the Dahan are familiar enough with the bringer of dreams and nightmares that they just don't care about this stuff happening in their lands at all, even if they otherwise would. So you can say take something like Tsunami that does tons of damage in a coastal land and kills all the Dahan there, and you'll get to do a bunch of damage and push everyone out of it and generate a bunch of fear, and the Dahan just won't care. So that's pretty nice. The other thing that isn't immediately obvious is that the power pushes, it's not it may push everyone to destroy, it has to. The invaders are absolutely running away unless they're in a city, in which case I guess they don't want to abandon their nice big buildings or something. But all explorers and villages, you have to push them. You can't choose not to. So that can get a little bit awkward if you're trying to, like, have a ravage in the same land where you want to hit something, or if you have the things like the trees and stones speak of war, or the other one that causes Dahan to deal damage, because if they deal damage via Dahan, they're still affected the same way. So you can end up sort of causing a weird situation where you have to push some invaders out of a bad ravage for them just because of how the power works. So you want to have this in mind basically always when you're picking powers and thinking about what they're going to do and things like that. It changes a lot about the game. The final note, as we'll see when we get to Ocean, the Ocean is this power interacts favorably with the Ocean's special rules, which is one of the reasons I was happy to save both of the high complexity spirits to be in the same game together. So just keep that in mind. I'll mention it when we get to the Ocean as well. So let's look at the rest of the card. We've got growth options. We've got a pretty standard Reclaim and Gain. We have, interestingly, Reclaim 1 on a growth option that also allows us to add a presence. That's nice. It can only be used to add a presence where you already have one, so to establish a place of power, which this is Bringer's worst card, I think, and is the only thing on the basic card that cares about places of power. So this is a pretty weak growth option, but by the time Reclaim 1 is appealing, you probably are well set up enough for your targeting that you don't really care. You just want to get it off the board so you get more powerful, rather than caring all that much about where you put it on the island. You've got gain a power card, add a presence at 1, perfectly reasonable, and then you've got add a presence at range 4, but it has to be a land where there's some sort of creature that can dream, so Dahan or invaders, and you gain some energy. I would describe these growth options as serviceable. It's interesting that there are 4 of them, where some spirits only get 3. None of them is really a standout. This is probably the best of them. Range 4 is obviously nice. 2 energy is a pretty reasonable amount of burst energy. Even so, it's, pretty moderate. There isn't a growth option you're excited about. Also worth noting, 3 out of 4 of the options have you grow, but none of them have you double grow. So Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares is quite slow to get presence onto the board, particularly because if you have to reclaim all, you don't get to put any presence on the board, and you can't make up for that with a double grow later. You're going to grow at less than 1 per turn on average, pretty much assuredly. I don't think you can really get by on just reclaim 1ing all over the place, especially since it adds the presence at range 0. This is also... It's also interesting for a spirit that has 4 growth options. This is the only one you do on turn 1 most of the time. Sometimes it's nice to get a power card, I guess, but between having longer range and gaining you energy, this is definitely a turn 1 standout to set you up. The growth tracks, it's a pretty solid growth track. It's shorter by 1 than some growth tracks because you start with 2 presence on the board, although most do. The other thing is the growth tracks are, by and large, pretty high quality. You don't have any steps that do nothing at all except for this single 2-card play step. Well, you have 2 steps that do nothing on card plays. You have to sink in 2 dead growths before you get your 3rd card play, and then you can't... This any is so weird too. Basically, the energy track is great because every step does something, and your elements actually do matter and you have good use for them. The card play track is bizarre. It takes forever to get anywhere. You don't have a double growth, so it takes a long time to churn through it, but eventually you get to play any number of cards, which I guess looks more impressive than playing 4, but probably is functionally about the same as 4 card plays. Unfortunately, to get there, it takes 5 growths to get to basically any number of card plays, and you start at 2. So you're not really rewarded for growing early on this track at all. My feeling is that I almost always grow these 2 nodes to begin with because they're such high returns. The moon, you'll notice you want moon and you tend to want a lot of moon for the innate powers, so this node is pretty good too. Then probably you get up to 3 just because 3 is good. I don't think I've ever bothered to go beyond this node on the card play track. It's just like such diminishing returns, especially when you get something for every single presence you put in here. I think the only exception would be if you play with Spread of Rampant Green. I'm not sure I've ever actually played Bringer and Spread of Rampant Green on the same board. Probably because they don't really have a lot of obvious synergies other than the fact that in order to get anywhere on this track, Bringer really needs help. But I guess you could also get Indomitable Claim or something like that that lets you grow yourself, and then maybe you'd get there. But for the most part, you're going to be looking to go to here, then go to here, go to here or here, then go to here, then go up here in most games. Although, I've also got to say that in most games, you probably won't get beyond about here anyway before the game ends, just because it's so hard to grow without the double option. In any case, the good news is you start quite powerful, right? 2 energy per turn, 2 card plays per turn, even if you don't grow at all. That's pretty solid. It takes a lot of work on a lot of spirits to get to 2 energy and 2 card plays per turn. So, no major complaints. It's just sort of interesting tracks. The innate powers, Spirits May Yet Dream, gives your friend a weird dream vision. The standout of it is that you can turn any face-down fear card face-up, which means basically you'll see it in the interface in the actual game, but you get to click on any unrevealed fear card and it just leaves it face up forever, so you can then refer to it. This is obviously really nice because if you manage to build up a bit of a buffer on the fear cards by using this early, then you can plan to a certain extent around what the fear card is going to be when you're deciding what plays to make. One of the interesting things about this that I should think about more than I do is that sometimes you actually want to reveal not the next fear card but the one after it, because often the turn you reveal this, you aren't really going to be able to make very many decisions about it. So there's no point in turning up one that's going to resolve this turn if you've already locked in all your fast powers and everything's under control. You're better off looking at the next one so that you can know what that is. Because especially starting at fear level 2, the fear cards get quite strong. And knowing what they are can really, even in some of the games I've already played, there have been a couple of times where I've said, oh, well, we're going to count on the fear card to bail us out or hope the fear card bails us out. Obviously, if you know what it is, you don't have to worry about that. Then the spirit you target with this gains an element they have at least one of if you have 3 moon. It's a nice, handy ability, helps you turn on major power kickers. You can target yourself with it, which is nice. It's sort of a bummer that it has to be an element they already have at least one of, because some of the, like, you can't use it to turn on the beast element for night terrors, or there are a couple of other innate powers where you only need one of a certain element, but it can be kind of hard to get. The beast on Thunder Speaker's Gather the Warriors can be one like that too. So it's sort of a bummer that you can't get that, unlike, say, Gift of the Elements or whatever. But it's a nice bonus when you get it. It's another argument for unlocking this moon pretty quickly, though assuming, I think all of your starting cards have moons, so assuming you've picked up moon cards later, unlocking the 3rd card play is generally about as good. It just depends on what majors and things you've gotten that you want to weave in. Night Terrors makes fear. Makes 1 to 3 fear, depending on how much you kick it, fine. It's obviously not exciting, but it synergizes with one of your starting cards, and it also just, between this and this, you just generate a lot of fear just sort of for hanging out and being a terrifying nightmare creature, which I guess is fair enough. And so you can definitely get fear wins or get 2 to 3 fear cards in a turn sometimes, and that is quite powerful, and this contributes to that. So it's not the kind of innate power where you go out of your way to set it up, but it's worth a little bit to make sure you get an extra level of it or whatever if you're deciding between close options. The other thing to remember about it is fast and has to target a land with invaders at range 0, which can get a little bit awkward because later on when they're ravaging in lots of places, you'll have this problem where sometimes lands with you don't want your presence in lands with invaders necessarily, and like you can end up pushing them out with things like this, but for the most part it works. You just want to be careful to do things in the right order. Like if you're going to do a fast damage power and push a bunch of things around, you might want to do this first so you don't screw up your targeting or whatever. In terms of the starting cards, we've got Call on Midnight's Dream. This card is sweet. I love this card. It is a true gambler's card. It doesn't have to be, but I always play it as one because it's awesome when it works. So if the target land has Dahan, you gain a major power. If you forget this power, that is to say Call on Midnight's Dreams, not the major power that you just took, you gain energy equal to the number of Dahan in the land, and you can play the major power you got immediately for its cost. So you can, and I usually do, on turn 1, just find a place with 2 or 3 Dahan in it, plock one of your presence there, because this is another range 0 targeting restriction, target it up, take a look at 4 minor powers and just 4 major powers and just see if you get to drop a bomb starting on turn 1. It's really the first time I tried to do it, I sort of felt like it was probably bad, and certainly the people I was playing with at the store were like sort of suspecting I was throwing the game, but the more I do it, the more I think it's probably just straight up correct. It's very hard to whiff on major powers. If you grow with the +2 energy on the first turn, you get 2 energy from this, you get 2 energy from your presence, you get 2 energy at least from this, because you're going to target a 2 Dahan land, and you might gather some Dahan, or one of your friends might gather some Dahan first. So you're talking about 6 to 8 energy, depending on what else you played and how many Dahan were there. I guess 4 to 6, depending on what else you played and how many Dahan were there. But 4 to 8 energy to drop a major power. It's a lot of energy. The other thing is, you know, you can play any major power in the basic deck for 8. You can play effectively any one for 6. And they are very, very high impact. It's really hard, even if you get one of the support ones, you roll out one of those support ones early on, suddenly you're feeding everyone else powers with, whatever that one with the bird made out of water is on the art. Anyway, or Power Storm, you're letting people copy stuff. Like, it just gets out of hand very quickly. It's also worth noting it's really flexible. You are not required to forget this power. You could forget another power and try again. And even if you forget this power and gain the energy, you don't have to play the major power immediately. If you get a fast one that defends a Ravage, you can just stick it in your hand and play it next turn. It's very powerful, very flexible. I think it's basically almost always worth doing on turn 1, because at low difficulty levels, you're in little enough trouble that you can afford to, and at high difficulty levels, you're in enough trouble that you sort of have to. It's just the most high impact thing you can do on turn 1. If for some reason you don't like that kind of gamble, you can use it to generate 2 fear whenever you want, which is fine, it's good. Honestly, the way this interacts with your basic defense card is good enough that the major cost of doing it early is removing the free 2 fear for 0 from your deck, but you can generally generate a little bit of fear at range 0 with this stuff anyway, so it's not a huge loss. Dreams of the Dahan, gather up to 2 Dahan, or make fear for each Dahan up to a maximum of 3. Nice. Both modes are good. Nice range, unlike most of your powers. It's fast to gather Dahan, which is nice, which means you don't have to set it up. You don't have to set up for a Ravage on the next turn with slow. You just gather them in. They can fight that turn, whatever you want. Plus it makes fear at 0, and it does so at range. This is just a nice, solid card. I love it. Love everything about it. Great card. This is probably the card I'm least likely to replace from the Bringer deck, just because it's nice, it's a good role player. The only real downside of it is that you tend to take forever to unlock your third, and especially your any card play. And so things like, and you start with 2 energy income and have a good burst energy gain on your best grow option. So cheap cards like this are at less of a premium for Bringer than basically any other spirit in the game, because it's so hard to get more card plays and it's so easy to afford to play big heavy hits. That's another reason I like getting a major early. Side note is that you're heavily limited on card plays and not so limited on energy. It's not quite as extreme as Vital Strength of the Earth, but it's pretty close. So getting early access to majors is nice. I guess you could use this to get a major, but it's not clear to me that that's any better than just using this, especially because you only get the energy for forgetting this power if you used it to get the major, not if you grew into the major. So finally, Dread Apparitions. When powers generate fear in the target land, defend 1 per fear, and then 1 fear is created. So powers have to generate the fear. That means that if villages or towns are destroyed, that fear doesn't count unless the destruction was replaced with this power here. Similarly, if they're, if Dahan killed them or if they're destroyed by like a fear card, that won't generate more defense. But still, you get 1 fear for playing, you get 1 defense for playing the card. Then you can generally generate more with Dreams of the Dahan or Night Terrors if it's at range 0. You have to be a little bit careful. This has a longer range than this, so you can get tripped up by planning to defend with the combination, and then you can't target the Night Terrors there. That has definitely happened to me before. It also sort of sucks that it costs 2. It can be a very high defend number for that cost, but since you have to team it up with something else and you don't get a lot of card plays in a turn, it's awkward. It's a fine card. It's a useful role player. It's handy to have in the deck. I don't love it. And then Predatory Nightmares. It's a slow range 1 of a Place of Power. This is your only card in your starting deck that cares about a Place of Power. 2 damage, push 2 Dahan. But as usual, the 2 damage can't actually kill anything. So generally you just push some Dahan and push some invaders around. The fact that you get some Dahan push as a bonus on your push an Explorer is fine. But most of the time this is either push an Explorer or push a house and win the Ravage. It's okay. It's expensive. It makes a fair bit of fear, I guess, because of the way if you hit a village, it makes 2 fear, so I guess that's fine. I don't love this card. I don't hate it. It gives you something to do on turn 1 if you don't have anything else obvious to do. It'll prevent a Ravage pretty reliably. It's fine. I prefer to pay 1 for something like it doesn't compare to the gold standard set by River Surges in Sunlight, which gets to do something like this for 1 or 0, but River is nuts for that reason, so whatever. Good enough. Overall, therefore, I think the starting cards for Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares are kind of bad, but luckily you get to replace them quite quickly if you want, because you have a reasonable grow that gains you a power card, and you have Call on Midnight's Dreams. Don't sleep on the ability to replace a different power with this. Particularly if you don't play Predatory Nightmares on turn 1, you might just never play it. So if you get a cheap major power, one that costs 2 or 3, replacing this card with it is almost always a strict upgrade unless the elements are a lot worse. And despite having 4 elements, this doesn't even have all 4 of the elements you care about because it doesn't have air on it, and all of your important powers care about air. So this is sort of a deeply questionable card on a lot of levels. Replacing it is not bad. If you get a card with Call on Dreams and Nightmares, on Midnight Streams, that you don't want to play immediately and you don't particularly need the energy, there's really nothing wrong with just replacing Predatory Nightmares. Anyway, that's Bringer. It's a weird one. Hopefully you'll get a better feel for it by watching it in play, but Definitely weird, definitely fun. I like playing Bringer a lot. One of my favorites. As is the next spirit, Ocean's Hungry Grasp, which I always forget the full name of because you're literally just the ocean. By which I mean you are actually the ocean. You can place your presence into the oceans, but may not move presence into inland lands. So just to be clear about what this means, let's take a look at the map boards quickly. This is the ocean. Normally, you can't do anything there, right? These lands are coastal lands. The ocean can end up with presence here. Everywhere else that isn't adjacent to the ocean is inland, and it is very difficult for ocean to get presence there. Okay. I just find the visual is maybe a little bit easier. So that's ocean in play. Oceans on boards with any of your presence, and that means any of your presence on the board, not necessarily any of your presence in the ocean. I believe it's a little unclear from reading it, but I believe your presence just has to be on the board. And I'm pretty sure I've played it that way. I've relied on that before and it's worked. I guess if it hoses me, we'll find out. But anyway, oceans on boards with any of your presence are treated as coastal wetlands for powers and blight. So that means you can target them with powers, you can cause blight to cascade onto them, although it's hard to imagine you'd want to since it would kill one of your presence, but it's better than cascading it onto somewhere where it'll cascade additionally maybe, or something like that. And any invaders or Dahan moved into the oceans are drowned. So basically you can push invaders, or I guess Dahan, although you don't want to, or gather invaders into the ocean. And if you do, you drown them, which destroys them. But in addition to being destroyed, they also generate energy for you. So any invaders that are drowned, you place on the card. And once you get up to X health of invaders, which is the number of players, you get an energy. So in the 2-player game that we're about to be playing with Ocean and Bringer, what happens is every village on here gives you an energy, every 2 explorers give you an energy, every explorer plus city gives you 2 energy, and so on. Now, in the online game, in the Steam client, thankfully, it automatically does this. It just keeps track, and once you hit a multiple of X, it just gives you the energy. You don't have to manually exchange it. Technically, in the board game, you do, but I'm not sure. There's no downside to having energy instead of pieces sitting here, so unless you want to see all of your victims, there's no reason not to. The one thing I've never noticed is I've never seen that there's any way to see what is already on here. Like, in a 2-player game, I've never seen a picture of an explorer on it anywhere, but that could just be that it's never occurred to me to check when there was one waiting. I'm not sure. I don't know quite how the interface displays that. I'm also not really sure it matters, because drowning stuff is obviously always good, and you generally can't spend energy in the middle of drowning things with powers, but anyway. So you can probably already see there's a strong synergy between this ability and Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, because when the ocean is in play, you can use Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares to give people such horrible nightmares that they throw themselves into the sea where they drown. Very Lovecraftian. I don't really love Lovecraft, but I like that particular thing, primarily because it is sweet and very effective. This is obviously a really good thing to do. It helps mitigate the downside on Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, although it's obviously a long way from inland lands to the ocean. You have to sort of chain people together to really eventually get them into the ocean there. Though even pushing them into coastal lands is still a huge improvement, because the ocean is so powerful in coastal lands and so weak inland. The other big downside is, since you're not allowed to push cities as Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, you have a real inland city problem, where if there's a city inland, really all anyone can do about it on the team is try to kill it with Dahan, because it's very difficult for the ocean to target it, and it's very difficult for Bringer to have any powers that'll remove it directly. But still, it's fun and it's neat when your special rules work together like that. So the ocean also has very interesting growth options. They do a lot, but for these two, what they do is sort of mixed in terms of value. So the most straightforward is you can double grow by adding presence in 2 oceans or in the same ocean twice, and you get an energy. So straightforward double grow. Double grow that gives you something else is obviously really nice. This is a very powerful thing to do, particularly on turn 1 or whenever you have breathing room. You get to ramp yourself twice and get an extra burst energy. Very nice. Then this is your single grow. It also gives you a power card. Grow and power card is pretty nice. It's always nice to get more powers. This also pushes 1 presence out from each ocean. This is generally an advantage because with this power you tend to accumulate a lot of presence in oceans, but you have these various things like this and this that are range 0 coastal, although this doesn't actually care because the ocean counts as coastal and it just creates fear and there don't have to be invaders there or anything, so this doesn't matter. But this does. You obviously being able to free drown various buildings is awesome, but it's range 0 coastal, so you have to actually have presence in the coastal lands in order to use it. And then your reclaim gathers presence into each ocean. So the problem can be both of these. This power only adds presence to oceans. This power actively pulls your presence back into the oceans after you've gotten it out. This is the only way to get it out of the oceans onto the shore and adds 1 to the shore. So there's a really interesting tension between using this power. One thing that's really tempting to do is to just use these 2 powers, right? Grow, grow, reclaim, grow, grow, reclaim. That's normally a really good cycle. You get presence onto the board quickly, then you reclaim, get all your cards back, then you repeat. The problem is, if you do that, you never get to use Ocean Breaks the Shore, and it becomes incredibly difficult to get range on anything very far inland, even with the major powers that have like 2 range, because all of your presence is just this giant stack in the ocean, and that's really not very good. So with Ocean's Hungry Grasp, you're weirdly sort of looking for excuses to weave this in, almost as much as you're looking for excuses to weave this in, because you want to be able to maintain your presence on the shores to drown villages and target and things like that. But the good news is you gain burst energy from 2 of your powers, including your full reclaim, 2 of your growth options, including your full reclaim, which is really nice. You get power cards from 2 of them. You tend to get a lot of stuff. Now, in exchange, your actual energy economy off of your track is terrible. Starts at 0, goes to 2 over the course of 6 growths. Pretty wretched. It doesn't matter as much as it looks like, because between getting chip energy for these growth options and especially getting energy for drowning things, you basically don't rely on this income for your energy at all. The elements are almost as nice because getting this power up high is very powerful. Getting this up generates some more fear, which is just generally nice, especially with Bringer as your teammate, because you can really start pounding home the fear cards. This is still a pretty good growth track. You certainly don't want to ignore it entirely. And obviously getting up to 1 passive growth from 0 is still a huge effective increase, even if it's not numerically all that impressive. You can generally get to here pretty quickly. There are still a fair number of turns left in the game, etc., etc., etc. The card plays, you get to 2 immediately, but it takes a while to get to 3. Once you get to 3, you can rush 4 and 5 if you want. These tracks are some of the most flexible in the game, in my mind. You're pretty happy to have any node from the top one, because all of these elements are useful to you and handy to have around. Once you, with the exception of the single dead node after getting 2 card plays, you're pretty happy to have most of these. Which track you care about more is going to depend pretty heavily on how aggressively you're taking major powers. You can play an ocean that just wants to get a couple of really heavy-hitting majors very quickly. If you're doing that, you obviously want to favor the top path. I mean, realistically, you're going to unlock your second card play on turn 1 all the time. I don't know of any spirit that doesn't want 2 card plays on turn 1. I even think if I were redesigning Spirit Island from the ground up, I might make it so that the only spirits that don't start with 2 card plays are ones that can't get it on turn 1, like Vital Strength of the Earth, because it's just such... The second card play is I think, the biggest power spike you get in the entire game. So, like, with the exception of really weird spirits like Vital Strength of Earth, you prioritize it so heavily that if you have something like this, honestly, it might as well just start at 2. It'd be a more interesting decision about what to do early on. Anyway, that aside, once you unlock this, it's really unclear where you want to go, and it's going to depend a lot on the circumstances and a lot on what you're trying to do. I've gone both ways and had both of them be effective. It's really just about responding to the situation. And particularly about responding to when you get your first major and whether it's good. Yeah, is basically what I'd say. Because you definitely want to get yourself in position where you're doing high impact turns, obviously, but you also want to get yourself into position where you're doing this sort of thing earlier than later, which means either a third card play or hitting this water node and maybe this earth node to get to 2 earth off of 2 card plays, right? So my feeling is that the worst thing to do is to sort of balance the tracks. Though I guess going to 3 here and then going the rest of this can be fine too. Yeah, they're interesting tracks. We'll see how I deal with it in this game. I think there are a lot of different ways you can go. Finally, we have the innate powers, which I've sort of touched on just because they relate to all this stuff. This one's straightforward. It just makes fear. You can target a coastal land, but nothing else has to be true about it. And if you don't have presence in coastal land, you have literally lost the game. So this is just always free fear. It's fine. Obviously, this is another nice synergy with Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares because it's fear-focused, so you get more fear. Great. This power is awesome. As noted, the there might have been a weird blip in the video there. Mouse just froze. Sorry if so. Anyway, the coastal range 0 is very important, particularly if you're leaning heavily on your full reclaim here. You definitely want to be careful to set this up. It's also one that's very easy to mess up and that you want to be playing with foresight about, because you'll often be assigning presence somewhere and wanting to drown something in that slow phase or even in the next slow phase. You can end up with like real frustrations about targeting this such that sometimes it gets wasted. But the upside is that in a 2-player game, successfully using this is destroy a village, gain an energy, which is a preposterous thing to get for free on top of all your other cards. So it's really good. Definitely worth focusing around. This version of it is especially good and especially important if you're teaming up, as I will be in the upcoming game, with Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, because Bringer has a lot of trouble with cities. This is just gravy, but, you know, hard to... Classic top level innate power. Good if you can get it, hard to get it. The hand, we've got Call of the Deeps. Gather an explorer. If the land you're gathering into is the ocean, you can gather another explorer. It's great. Gets rid of an explorer at fast speed for 0. Sometimes you get 2. If you prevent 2 builds with this, you feel like a god, and it's awesome. It's difficult to do because there have to be explorers that are planning to build on 2 different coastal lands on the same board, since you have to gather them into a single ocean. It happens much more on the thematic map, or it happens relatively frequently if you hit the coastal lands level 2 explore card. Sometimes it happens with some of the level 3 explore cards that hit 2 different lands. Rarely happens on turn 1, but you probably win if it does. With the exception of there are some invader cards that spawn extra explorers at higher levels, and then sometimes you can or do extra explorers or things like that, and sometimes then you're in good shape. Anyway, it's a very good power. The baseline of killing 1 explorer for free, you think about it, you're often quite happy with Lightning Swift Strike to kill 1 explorer for 3 energy. This is 0. And you get half an energy back for it. or some percentage of an energy back for it, depending on how many players are involved, to do the drowning. Great card. Has all your elements too. Well, not Earth. Has most of your elements too. Yeah, great card. Grasping Tide, another great card. Defend 4 in a coastal land. Also creates 2 fear. This is range 1, making it quite easy to target, but can only target coastal lands. I have definitely fallen foul of this in planning, thinking, oh, I'll hit this land that's next to the coast because I have a presence in that coastal area. Can't do it. The actual target has to be coastal. Still, I would take 1 energy, defend 4. I've pretty happily taken defend 4 for 1 energy with no other abilities out of the minor power deck, let alone out of the starting deck. Also makes 2 fear, a lot of defense. It's great. Swallow the Land Dwellers. You get to drown an Explorer, a Village, and a Dahan. Obviously, you'd rather not drown the Dahan, but you have to if it's there. So, little awkward to target. Also range 0 coastal, just like this. So, sometimes it's hard to... If you play this, it makes it easier to trigger this, but you often run out of villages to eat between the 2 of them and don't end up playing this card because you don't want to eat the Dahan. That said, if they explore... You know, if you put a presence somewhere where they explore, you let them build, then you eat both. That's a nice, tidy cleanup. Hopefully there aren't any Dahan there. You don't have a good way to move them, but maybe your friend can, or maybe you can team it up with this or whatever. It's a great card. You just have to be a little bit careful with the targeting restrictions, and it's okay to eat a Dahan sometimes as a treat, but you don't want to make a habit of it and just run out of them on the island, particularly if you're teaming up with Bringer like I am, because you're going to need those Dahan to clear out the inland cities that you have trouble getting to. Finally, we have Tidal Boon. You have to target another spirit, so if you're playing solo, this is useless, which I wish there were not cards that were useless playing solo. It feels bad. I mean, it's not useless. It has good elements, but anyway. I wish it would, like, only gave the energy if you targeted another spirit and you could target yourself for the push. Whatever, you can't. But it's a great card. The spirit you target gains 2 energy. You can push a village and up to 2 Dahan from one of their lands. If Dahan are pushed into the ocean, they get in little boats, like on the art. Smart. And therefore they can move to any coastal land instead of drowning. So the best case scenario for this is obviously awesome. You clear out a village that they just built, you leave the Explorer there, you leave 1 Dahan there to kill the Explorer and the Ravage, then up to 2 other Dahan get to go wherever you need them, and the other person gains 2 energy and it only costs you 1. It's a great card. Ocean's cards are awesome, I think. To the extent that it's often hard to figure out what to replace when you get your first major, which is one reason that you might want to go up this track instead and go heavily on the minors. Generally, I'll replace this. It's fine. Call of the Deeps is also one that drops off as the game goes on sometimes, although it is very nice to have it once you hit the 2s for potentially coastal lands and the 3s. So it's sort of weird because it's weakest for the... It's weakest in sort of the middle turns. So it can be tempting to replace it, and I don't think it's necessarily a mistake, but if the game does go long, it suddenly gets powerful again. Makes it hard to decide. Okay, so that is Ocean's Hungry Grasp and Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, our 2 upcoming spirits. We will also be facing the final adversary next time, but I'm going to cut the video here because it's already gotten pretty long, and I think I might have to go and eat, so I will return and do another meet and greet on the adversary, which honestly they deserve because they're England, who I hate. Not actual England is fine, but England, the adversary in Spirit Island, is hateful. So I will have plenty of ranting to do about that, and I will do that next video. Thanks for watching. See you soon.